Today's video is on feeding, and feeding is different for everybody. Right now I'm just going to show you a routine that I usually use morning and night, and in terms of amounts and how much you feed your horse. I'll go over that at the end of the video in terms of how you calculate how much hay you should be feeding or how much grain, but regardless of the math that it takes, because normally a horse is going to eat 2% of their body weight a day in terms of roughage, and then whether they need grain or not is really dependent on the animal and how you use them and so forth. Obviously a high performance horse is going to be fed differently than a little pony, a little Shetland pony who is just a pet. So those are all things you need to take into consideration. If you have a trainer, obviously you can always look to them to find out what their recommendations are for feeding. And sometimes they change as the horses change and their jobs change. Also, it also depends whether horse shows are coming. Sometimes for particular horses, you might amp up their food before a horse show, say if they're jumpers and you want to get them a little bit up more than normal. Now, I always put my grain in first, and on your grain, I always store my grain in plastic containers with lids to keep animals out and rodents. I never keep the bags on the floor. Your rodents are just going to eat right through those. So if you can empty your bags into plastic containers of some kind, or metal or whatever, that's better. I also label all of them because in the event that you're not there or the regular person isn't there to do the feeding, they know what each thing is so that they don't accidentally misfeed an animal. Now as far as measuring cups, so you can get all kinds of measuring cups, just depends on your needs. You can get cups that actually give you weight, like a pound type scoop, or something similar. You can kind of see what works for you. I tend to work with this scoop. It's about the same as that one, just a different shape. When I feed, I know what all my horses take. I tend to use senior a lot because the Purina senior seems to be pretty good for all kinds of horses. The other feeds, we've had trouble with them getting a little wild. For my performance horse, I might add a little Omoline 500 for him. I have a pregnant mare, so I give her some senior as well as some Omoline 300 while she's pregnant, and also she'll get that while she's nursing. And the babies will get that when they start. The baby will get that once he starts eating food as well. I have, I'll have to get that one to feed. Can't feed that one quite yet. I have a couple horses that I feed outside when the weather's nice, and I have flat feed buckets for them, and I'm fortunate enough to let them eat together because they leave each other alone. It doesn't work for everybody's mix of horses. It really depends on how well they get along. I give my young one, Enriched 12, a little bit. It's a mineral supplement to help with bone growth, just in the first 2 years. After that, we don't need that anymore. And then I've got a little pony, little 12-hand pony, who has been trying to be a little colicky. So for him, I've been giving him some probiotics just to help him be comfortable and not actually colic all the way. So this is just a little preventative action. I just empty the probiotic. He doesn't take much because he's little, into his feed. And this was given to me by a vet, so I didn't just come up with that. Okay. Now some of your horses might get supplements. You can use these supplements from, say, Smart Pack. And some horses have different needs. The only horse of mine that has supplements is an elderly horse. He's almost 30. And he gets some pellets to help prevent colic, things like that. I don't actually own this particular horse, so she's going based on her vet's recommendations. So he gets just a pack once a day, and having the Smart Pack is so easy to add. Now, if you're not familiar with the feeds and everything, all of your stalls should have a stall chart and I'll show you one later, that identifies the horse. The owner should have the vet's phone number, their contact number, but also what I recommend, their feed chart for the morning and for the evening. But I also recommend on feed charts that you have a photograph of the horse, because you'd be surprised how many people really can't recognize animals. So having a photo really helps, especially if you need someone to cover for you in an emergency or something like that. So I do recommend having a photo on all your feed cards to avoid that particular situation. Now when throwing hay, it all kind of depends on your setup. For this year, we have a mix of bales, small bales, but we also got some of the 3x3x8 bales, which are a little bit harder to handle, harder to store. That's why it's in the middle of my aisle. So the big bales come in big giant flakes, and you might need a way to tie them up or keep them closed or hook them, because they can come apart pretty easily. Now I use a mix right now of a Timothy Brum Orchard mix. That's what I could get. I prefer straight Timothy in my part of the country. Not every part of the country feeds the same. But what I do is this one, all the flakes might be a little different because each of the bales, some are softer than others. This one's a little bit thicker. So what I do when I feed is I try to make the weight of what I throw equivalent to what I recognize a regular small bale. If you come in here for a minute. Normally what I prefer the small bales. They're easier to handle. You can move them easily, and plus they're cut up in little bales. So I'm most familiar with feeding, a flake. And this is a single flake. And not all flakes are the same. It depends how densely packed the bale is. This one's pretty light. I just try to feed consistently. So, and what works on the horse to make sure they're not getting too fat, too skinny. One flake might be morning and one flake at night might be sufficient for a pony, but for a larger horse, 16-3N horse, might need, 3 to 4 flakes morning and night depending on their body type. But for now, I'm working with the big bales. So for what I do, whether they're little flakes or big flakes, is I have a feed cart that I fill with hay, so it's easy to maneuver. And with these big flakes, I really just have to start ripping it apart to get about the size of a flake. And I have to go by weight, not by volume, because it might look like a lot. If I step on it, I can feel how thick it is. This particular horse usually gets about a flake and a half. I'll have to come tap their wad off, but that'll be good. A little pony, this was a little 12-hand pony. He's not going to get a whole lot. Now, I usually feed right at the front of the stall or by their grain bucket, because they're less likely to potty there or to rip it out and pee on it. For one horse, I feed at the back of the stall with the door, because he likes to stand facing the other way, and I don't want him to waste hay by pooping. Now, in the morning, if you find a lot of leftover hay, especially if it's a new horse, back off what you're feeding, because you're going to end up just wasting hay if you're not going to eat that much. Now, if you can feed your horse 3 times a day, it's even better to even out what they eat. But most people only feed twice, one in the morning, one in the evening. And so you just have to kind of work out what's the best situation for your horses. Now, in the summertime, as long as we have grass, we try to back off all the hay. And we're lucky enough to have pasture. They can live on grass and grain and not need any additional hay. Not everybody is quite so fortunate. So I'm going to show you a sample stall card. And also how to determine your feeding needs, how to calculate how much hay you need to buy. And here's an example. That's it for how to feed your horse. Good luck and happy riding.